Hey everybody, what's going on? Eric here. And I was just doing a little bit of reading out of the Sweetwater catalog. Now you notice I haven't been doing too much as far as videos go because I've been kind of busy with stuff around here, plus I've been practicing a little bit with the guitar and trying to get the wannabe Ibanez Gem kick guitar done. Now if you've been following my videos as far as the kick guitar goes, you will know that basically the neck is done. Frets are good. Still have the radius as far as the fretboard itself goes with the inlays. I ended up making a new truss rod cover. The original one was black. This one now is a pearloid to match the pick guard that is on there. I'm not too sure what I want to do with the headstock yet. I haven't decided. I was thinking about maybe getting a hold of a company and making a custom decal maybe for the headstock. But I've been working more on the body lately and trying to get that done. Now, you've seen the inlays that I've done on it and basically sanded everything down, got everything flush and flat. Now it's time to put the rub-on poly on it. Yes, poly let me rub on it a little bit. Da-dum-bum-bum. So I ended up putting 5 coats of rub-on poly. Now what I used to sand the body with was a Air DA sander. It's just a rotary sander. It's a circle disc, 220 grit sandpaper. Now if you were to take 220 grit sandpaper and put it on a sanding block and move side to side or crisscross, you will have crisscross scratches from the 220 grit in your wood or the inlays or whatever. So if you would try to stain that, because of those scratches being in the wood, you might end up with dark lines in the wood in different directions depending on how you sanded it. So I kind of don't like that. I know some of you guys who've used 220 grit sandpaper on wood really don't have too much of a problem with it. Me, yeah, I kind of want it to be like a 400 grit sandpaper to sand out the 220 grit in order not to have those scratches, because I have done some work with wood where I end up having some scratches in the wood, go to stain it, now you got darker lines because of the stain getting inside those scratches. But using the DA sander, because it oscillates and moves from side to side, it doesn't leave really harsh scratches in anything, and it dulls it out but doesn't leave real deep scratches in it. That's what I did with the body of this, and I did it this way to flatten it out really quick, make everything nice and smooth, not leave any scratches in the inlay portion of it. It did haze them over to where when I put the rub-on poly on there, it does have something to bite into, but I used the 20 grit instead of the 400 so that the rub-on poly will soak into the wood a little bit more than it would with the 400 grit sandpaper to bite into it, so you're guaranteed you won't chip or have any problems with that. So the body of this thing is coming out pretty good. Like I said, I got about 5 coats on there. Before I put the 5th coat on it, I sanded it down with 800 grit sandpaper to remove any dirt, dust, or any particles that might have laid into the finish while it was drying. So right now, it's still a little bit wet, so I still have a little bit longer time before I can put another coat on it. So now you can see it's not really shiny, kind of like the sides are real shiny. This doesn't have, it's got a little bit of a sheen to it, not much. So I still have to put probably maybe 15 more coats on this, get a nice build up on there, and then I'll do the same thing the way I always been doing is I'll sand it down and give it a little bit of a polish, a little bit of a buff afterwards. Now the inlays on this thing, I can't ask for anything better for the first time doing something like this. Now I've like embedded stuff in a body of a guitar. I've done the LED lights in there. I did the stained glass with the Angel guitar. This is the first time I actually did anything with the epoxy resin, making an inlay and making it flush with the body and everything. Now the stem is actually 2 colors. You can't really see it too well on because of the way the lighting is, but it's darker going up, and then it's dark on the edges and lighter in the center. What I ended up doing is I poured like a dark brown for the stem after I routed out the body for it, and then I routed that out as well after it dried with a rounded bit. It's a diamond bit, but it's rounded instead of being like a square or anything else. And what that did is kind of made an indentation in the center of the inlay. That way I poured like a white glitter, well, they call it diamond, black diamond, because it has a little bit of a glitter to it, a little bit of a sparkle to it, not much, but just a little bit. And that made it kind of like a grayish instead of being like a black. And when I sanded it back, I sanded it lighter here, or darker here, and it fades into the white, and then around the edges it's got a little bit of the dark on it, so it looks more like a stem, a little bit three-dimensional. Also, what I noticed as well too is I tried to, because the way I cut this out with the Dremel, I was burning the wood a little bit, so I left some like dark edges around where I ended up routing it out. That worked out pretty damn good, because the epoxy is a little bit transparent. You can kind of see some dark edges around the outline of the leaves, or whatever you want to call them. That worked out pretty damn good for this. So right now, like I said, it's got the 5th coat on it. Once that dries, I'll sand it back with some 800 grit sandpaper, and then go ahead and put my other next coat under. Now, what I've been using as far as a sanding block, instead of pulling out a real big sanding block that I have for doing automotive and going over this thing with that, I've been using, thanks to Adina, little pencil eraser. As long as the surface of the pencil eraser is flat and it doesn't have anything stuck to it, that'll make a little bit of a bump underneath the sandpaper. That way you're not sanding that bump into your finish or into the wood or whatever. This works out perfect. It's not too big, not too bulky, or sandpaper wraps around it perfectly, and it's flat. Now, as far as what I've been using, well, I've been using the epoxy resins. You all seen that, and it's a little bit of a tricky situation as far as trying to mix up the epoxy resin and add a color to it. And I really didn't come up with an actual solution to make it better, but there is a way to make it worse, and I can guarantee I've already done that. What I end up doing is I got 2 mixing cups. One is for the resin, one is for the hardener. Now, I'll first put the color in with the resin part of it, but I'll put the color in first. Then I'll put my resin, because it's a 2-part, it has to be mixed equally. So I'll pour my resin into the cup up to a certain line, and then I will pour the hardener into a separate cup at that same line. So I have both the same measurements. And then I'll take the resin portion with the color and mix it in with the hardener. And after I mix that up and I start noticing that maybe the color is still a little bit transparent, I'll end up adding a little bit more color to it to darken it up. And then I will add an equal amount of hardener to that, because now I'm making the resin a little bit thicker or a little bit more. I got to equal that out. Otherwise, you'll have a problem where it won't dry correctly and it'll stay rubbery. I've already found that out. And this way it works out pretty good. I haven't had any problems. And, you know, the company I've been using for, where's the camera lens at? This is what I've been using for the epoxy resins, glaze coating, whatever you want to call it. It's worked out very, very well for this. Now, as far as the coloring goes, Testros, I believe it's called, the company that makes the model paints, okay, the glues and shit that you'd use for plastic models or whatever, also makes kits like this. They are a acrylic paint set. They are water-based acrylics, which I found works a hell of a lot better in the epoxy resin than trying to use like an oil base or something like that. The acrylics work and plus I did some research on it to make sure that the acrylic will work a lot better and not cause any problems with drying or anything else. So the acrylics is what you want to get in a water base. Now, this is basically what they call a glitter burst. It has some like little bits of glitter. They're not really big, and you can get them all different colors. Like the color that I used was a black diamond, and I'm not too sure, as you can see, but it's not too bad. It's not too glittery. You just mix it really well. For the fluorescent part, I found a small kit with 3 colors in it. The green is out of it because I've been using it for doing basically the inlays that I did. And again, it is acrylic water-based paint. And I'm not too sure if they make another kit that has more fluorescent colors, but this is the only one I found. I just needed the green, and I couldn't buy the green separate, so I grabbed this. And you can pick this up at any, like, some home improvement stores will carry this stuff. A lot of the hobby stores will carry this shit as well. Now, for the next build that I'm going to do, I'm going to use the orange and the pink in that guitar. So, you know, I'm probably going to make fun of because I use pink in an electric guitar. But when you see it and how it gets done, bring it back to the 80s a little bit. Everything is basically done. All I have to do is just finish up with the coats of the glaze or rub-on poly on the body, and then once I get probably 20 coats on the face of it, I'm going to sand the whole body down with 800 grit sandpaper, and then I'm going to go over it for the last time, one more coat before I sand and polish it. And that should give me enough to where I can sand it back. The back and the sides are fine, there's really nothing wrong with it, but because I've been adding more to the top of it, I kind of want to blend it in around the edges. And when sanding the top of this thing to strip it down before, I made a nice sharp edge around the outline of the body. And sometimes when you do the glaze coating or whatever around the sharp edge, it kind of doesn't, it'll be thinner. So I want to make sure that this, I don't have any problems like that with this. Even though it's rub-on poly, it's very thin. It's basically like a water consistency, and I don't want to have any bare spots or any problems, or, you know, I want everything to kind of go into each other. So I'm going to end up resanding the whole body once I get 20 coats on the top of it, and then put one final last coat on. So that's about it. Been practicing a little bit of guitar and trying to kick the smoking part of it, and, you know, doing my vaping part. You know, this one's Apple. It's pretty good. It's not too bad. But other than that, I have a bunch of parts over here waiting to be put together. I do have a set of pickups here that I need to ship out to somebody that asked me for them. Basically, they were the old pickups that were on this Jem Wannabe kit guitar. They're not the greatest pickups, but they're not that bad either. So I got basically the electronics, the switch, the pots, and the 3 pickups, 2 humbuckers, and 1 single coil that I need to get shipped out. But I've been waiting to ship those out because I wanted to test this system first. But I want to test it with strings, not just, you know, plug it in, hook it up to an amplifier, and tap on each one to see if they work. I want to hear what they sound like with the strings. But that's it. I will catch all you all later. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for the likes. Thanks for the dislikes. And catch you all later.